Guys, this is Karthikeya Kantwal from Apex Finserv as usual, and I'm back with the weekend video series, and we're going to start right where we left off with the Elliott Wave. Now, before we move on to what was left, essentially the rule set of the corrective waves, the impulsive waves, and the fractal nature of Elliott waves, I would first, just take a brief recap of what was actually we discussed the last time around. Now we discussed the very basics of Elliott waves that were based on the Fibonacci extension or the Fibonacci ratios. We had different kinds of waves. The types are basically mono waves and poly waves. Mono waves being single patterns and poly waves are consisted of multiple mono waves, obviously as the name suggests. Now quickly moving on from there, we went on to discuss what exactly was the nature of an impulsive pattern or a corrective pattern. Basically, an impulsive wave is a strongly unidirectional wave, and the pullback, what happens after that strong directional move, is essentially called a corrective pattern or a corrective wave. I am oversimplifying, but at this point where we have not discussed the in-depth rule sets, we can generalize it as much. Then we had also discussed the basic rule set of what exactly was an impulse wave. Now, not essentially the mathematical rule set or the precise conditions that formed an impulse wave, but we discussed the psychology behind that, or the exact logic and reasoning that goes behind such tremendous buying or selling pressures, which is generally observed in an impulse wave. We discussed of the various legs that such as leg 1, leg 3, leg 5, which are directional in the same way, and 2 or 4 or 2 and 4, which are pullbacks in the opposite direction. After which we moved on to discuss in brief about what exactly is a corrective wave or a ABC pattern. Now, clubbing all of that together, what we have is one big Elliott wave pattern, which is known as the 1 to 5 pattern, or 1 to 5 plus ABC, which means 1 2 3 4 5 ABC pattern, where your 1 to 5 is your primary impulse wave, followed by ABC, which is a corrective pattern. But before we move on to the exact rule set, you have to understand that there is one very important fundamental concept of Elliott waves, is that all the patterns are almost always going to be fractal in nature. Now, with a very simple example of what fractal means for those who do not understand the term or who are new to the term, I would give you, let's say, talk about a tree, for example. So you have branches which have essentially the same properties of the tree, and if you look at them separately, you can pretty much identify what tree it is from. Similarly, Elliott waves too are fractal in nature, in the sense that within an impulse wave you can have multiple smaller 1 to 5 ABC patterns together on the larger time frame, which may add up to one big impulse wave or one big wave leg 3 or leg 5 of the same pattern. Now, if I want to put it into technical terms, one of the underlying principles of Elliott waves is that it is fractal in nature, which means that there are going to be underlying smaller short-term waves under running larger time frame waves. Elliott wave patterns that form on a longer term chart is seen as composed of a pattern of waves, but the same pattern or wave is also seen on a short term chart is seen to be made of a multitude of waves or multiple waves, which may or may not have complex structures as highlighted below. Now, these are just for example, as in the first one we can see that you have a typical 5 wave pattern, as in you have 1 2 3 4 5, which makes a complete impulse wave, where you have leg 1 followed by a pullback, the largest is leg 3 followed by a pullback 4, fourth wave which is not entering the first wave territory, and then you have the fifth wave closing above the third wave. So that becomes your primary impulse wave or the higher degree wave. However, inside that, as the price is moving, you can notice that from the leg 0 to 1, inside that as well, you have one large impulse wave, not large, but one micro impulse wave. Now, this higher to lower is the technical term, but for those who want to use simpler words, you can also use micro and macro. That works fine with me. As you can see, inside leg 1, you have 1 2 3 4 5 Elliott waves, followed by an ABC corrective pattern where begins the leg 2 or the third wave, inside which again you have a 5 wave pattern followed by a corrective pattern. Now, this happens in many directions. It's not necessarily strongly directional. It can also be the case in a flat Elliott wave or a triangular wave pattern. Similarly, in a zigzag correction, waves A and C have a 5 wave internal structure, where B has a 3 wave internal structure. Now that was an impulse example. This becomes an example of Elliott waves inside corrective waves, where your wave A or your leg A is the first part of the corrective wave, but itself contains one ABC wave, followed by another movement from A to B, which contains one more ABC, followed by a B to C, which closes at the same level at A or under that, which contains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 impulse based pattern. Now, this was a very generalized example, but if I talk about the precise rule sets of an impulse wave and a corrective wave, so we have 6 or 7 rules each. Now keep in mind, as we discussed last time, when you are trading Elliott waves, it is always preferred to take an entry on the impulse side of things rather than the corrective side of things, simply because the impulsive pattern is going to be a lot more easier to identify and to intercept and to actually gain some profit out of it, whereas the corrective patterns are largely confusing, and it is quite difficult to actually gauge where the corrective pattern is going to be ending for you to be planning a trade around it before it actually ends. Now we'll look at that with an example, but first talking about the rule set for an impulse pattern. Now, as discussed before, an impulse pattern is consisting of 5 waves, 3 impulse and 2 corrective waves, all of which must always follow the rules below. Now the first rule says that your second wave should never retrace all of wave 1. Now we are just going to be going through the rule set. I have one drawn chart underneath that, so we'll be looking at that later on. The second rule says that wave 3 must always go above the swing high point or the high point of wave 1. The third one again correlates that wave 3 can never be shorter than wave 1, because then the second rule won't be met. Then you have the fourth one, which says that wave 4 must not enter the trading range or the price range of the first wave itself. The fifth says that the fifth wave should be at least, here comes in the Fibonacci part, should be at least 38.2% of wave 4. Now there is also one simple rule correlating time, which connects the second wave and the fourth wave, that they should alternate with respect to time taken in their formation, or in simple words, ideally the fourth wave should take a longer time in forming than the second wave, both being corrective waves. Now when I look at it on an example, now this is a daily chart of Tata Motors. Now as you can see, we have used the swing point for the beginning of the move, then we closed it at the swing high, which became the first leg, and then you had the pullback. Now that pullback became the origin point of the second leg. Now here you can see that rule is being met, where the second wave or the second leg is not retracing completely the entire path of the first wave. Then you had the third wave, which is the largest wave until this point, which agrees again with the third and the fourth rules, that the third must break the high of the first wave and that it should be greater than the first wave. Then you had the fourth wave. Now the fourth wave also meets the rule set, because it is a pullback, but it is not entering the trading range of the first wave, which would have happened if it had broken and closed under 120, but it did not. Hence that rule 2 is being met, followed by the final buying pressure or the final up move, which is the fifth wave and the largest wave of this impulse move, which also met the parameters that it should at least make a move greater than 38.2% of the fourth wave, which was in our case somewhere around 135, 136. So all the 6 rule sets were met in this case, even when you talk about the time series, that the fourth wave from September to almost October entirely took a lot more time than the 15 days it took for the second wave to come. So that rule 2 is being met. Now as you can see, if you have watched the phase analysis video, then even without the Elliott waves pattern, it was pretty easy to judge the higher high, higher low formation in this case. However, we would have had multiple structure breaks, which would have complicated things a bit. But still, if you are able to identify structures, then identifying such impulse directional moves should not really be that much of a hard deal for you. All you have to do now is to be able to correlate the rule set and just verify things with respect to all the waves numbered 0 to 5. Now things start getting a bit muddier and a bit trickier, if I must say, when we start talking about the corrective side of things. Now when we talk about the rule sets for corrective waves, I have done things separately here. I have not actually written the rules as I did in the impulse wave 6 at a time, because corrective identification is a bit trickier. Now the first rule to a corrective wave is of course it should be preceded by an impulse wave, which it is going to be correcting. In this case, I have taken an example of jubilant food on the daily time frame, where I did find a nice example of an upward impulse wave labeled here as well. 0 to 5, you can see all the basic conditions were being met. Swing low, 0 to 1, 1 to 2, not retracing the entire path. Second to third being the greatest swing leg greater than 1. It is also breaking the high of 1, obviously. Then you had the third to fourth swing leg, which again is not entering the trading range of the first swing high point. Then you had the fifth, which is in this case not the largest, but still well above and greater than the 38.2 retracement of the fourth wave. So all the conditions are being met, so this does classify as an impulse move or an impulse wave. Now after an impulse wave, you start to have correcting sessions or corrective waves, which is visible here as well. After that clear 0 to 5 move, it went sluggish, or it is now even coming down. Now after 5 wave move, it is known as a 3-way corrective wave, as I've been talking about it again and again. 1 2 3 4 5 impulse, ABC corrective. So the first rule states that after your final fifth swing leg, or the fifth wave, or the fifth part, you should have a corrective leg A, which by and within itself should be a smaller or a micro impulse wave in the opposite direction, which is meant here. It's just not drawn on that same chart, but when we go down there, I have drawn it. Wave A should be a 5-wave structure by itself and should be less than 61.8% of the entire previous impulse wave. Now as you can see here, it is a 5-wave pattern where almost all of the conditions are being met, apart from the fourth not entering the trading range. It is a bit sketchy in this case, but for a lack of being able to find better examples and being tied by time, this was the best chart that I could find. Now this being a pretty decent example, not exactly a textbook ideal, but still somewhat acceptable example of 5-wave impulse pattern, can be referred to as a nice wave A for the corrective ABC pattern. Now when we move on to wave B, or the second part of things, wave B should not be more than 61.8%, here again the Fibonacci comes in, of the wave A, which in our case comes to be somewhere around 3000. Now at this point, wave A has already formed. We have a nice 5-wave corrective pattern and we have drawn it out. So wave B is essentially in the making right now. However, this too is not exactly ideal to be traded, because the rules say that it should not be 61.8% of wave A, which comes out to be at 3000, somewhere near 3010 ish levels. But again, it's not exactly precise. It does not state clearly that it is going to be 61.8. It might as well reverse from 38.2. It just says that it should not be greater than said level. Now let's say here we are trying to project the prices, because the wave ABC has not actually happened yet. So you can consider this as an example for the prices to go. You can come back and let me know a week or so later where the prices have gone. Now that would be the ideal B leg, which is in the opposite direction of the wave A, of course, and it is also meeting the regulation stating that it is not being greater than 61.8% of the entire wave A. Then we move on to the simplest rule set, which is the wave C, which only states that the poor last wave should close well under the wave A lowest point. Now there is one last rule which states that the entire ABC correction should not be greater than 61.8% or 0.618 value of the original impulse wave that preceded it. In this case, 0.618 comes to be around 2200. So as long as the C point does not end up breaking 2200 values, this would be a perfect example of 1 2 3 4 5 ABC corrective pattern. After the C point has formed, we can assume that this would be a larger 1 2 3 4 5 pattern in the making on some larger time frame, like the monthly, weekly, or well, that's it, I guess, not above monthly, because we don't have those charts. However, that is how Elliott waves work. I hope that you guys have a brief idea on what exactly is an Elliott waves. If you guys want more charts, let me know in the comment section below. I'll try to find as many as I can and I'll share it in the Telegram channel with you guys. Now this marks the end of the Elliott Wave side of things. We discussed about the theoretical side. We also discussed about the actual implementation and the basic rule set. Now keep in mind, we have only discussed the basic Elliott Wave correct impulsive and corrective pattern, or the 1 to 5 ABC pattern. We have not discussed the flat correction or the triangular correction, because to be honest, I think that is a bit that would be a bit overcomplicating things as of now. And also I think that this much is justified and well more than enough to find good swing, or you can say a bit short-term investment point of view kind of thing. It's not really suitable for intraday, because in my opinion you have to spend a lot of time manually finding all these charts, and you also have to verify them so that all the rules are being met, which takes up a lot of time and isn't really feasible for somebody who's looking for trades in the live market session. However, it is really useful for somebody who has a swing or a short-term investment kind of a view, where they are willing to hold on to their positions for a couple of weeks to maybe a month or two on the longer side of things. However, this marks the end from my side. If you have any questions, if you have any queries, let us know in the comments below, or you can always hit us up on Telegram @Apex back support, and check out our Telegram channel as well @Apex Principle. As usual, if you have been liking the content, if you like the weekend series and you want more of these kinds of videos, let me know what concept should I cover next in the comment section below. Don't forget to support us by leaving a nice comment, liking the video, subscribing and pressing that bell notification icon as well. I'll be back tomorrow with your daily dose of charts. Until then, I hope you are having a wonderful weekend, and I hope you have a good night's sleep. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.